Hello everyone, and welcome to the book Refuge, and welcome to another recommendations video. This one is for historical romances, specifically the trope of reformed rakes, which is super fun. First, I want to say that this trope isn't just for historical romance, but I beautifully, wonderfully, so happily have been on a binge of historical romance, which I have wanted to be on for so long because I have been buying suggestions you guys have been leaving me. I've been finding books on my own. I've been working on a couple of historical romance deep dives where I've been collecting books by my favorite authors, and I just hadn't been in the mood. I'd been reading contemporary romances for the last couple months, and finally, praise, I have been in the mood for it. And so in the past couple weeks, I've read about 15 historical romances, and I wanted to do some book recommendation videos that had more historical romance in them because I know you guys love that, and it's something that we, share. A lot of you found me because of my historical romance recommendations, and I didn't want to continue to just do the books themselves. So when I am tracking my books, I've started to write down which trope they have so that when I want to make these videos, it's easy to go back into my files, my spreadsheet, and be like, oh, these are the ones that had this trope. So enough of that. Let's go ahead and dive into our reformed rake. So what does reformed rake means? So this is a trope I'm an absolute sucker for, and it's basically, it's the playboy who finds his true love. It's the guy who was the man about town. He's usually extremely experienced, and in historical romance, and I mean in contemporary as well, he's finally finding that one woman that just stops him, that all the other women before, nobody could compare. Yes, it's very cliche, and yes, it can be a little obnoxious, but that's what a fantasy is. We all want that guy to think that we're the one that he'd give up his carousing ways for. But we're happy with the experience he's gained from said carousing. So let's get started with a book that I just read this week, and it has been on the list of Elisa Clay's book I just had to read because everyone talks about it. And we are talking about Sebastian St. Vincent from Devil in Winter. This is the third book in the Wallflower series, which is a super, super cute series. I'm working through the rest of my Elisa Clay. She is someone I plan to do a deep dive on very soon. But in this book, we have St. Vincent, who I never understood why he was called the devil, because I have read her series out of order. So I have been reading about St. Vincent for the last, when I first read the Ravenels, he is the father of a couple of love interests in that series. And so I know him, but I never realized why he was the devil. And that's because in the book previous to this, our love interest in that one gets kidnapped by him because she is an heiress and he really needs money. And so he's going to force her into marriage. And I'm reading that book and I'm like, what the hell? I love St. Vincent. How is she going to bring me back around to him? I may be ruined to this guy forever. Well, I should have trusted her, because in this book we get introduced to Evie, who is a really tragic person. And not tragic for her physical impediment, which is she has a stutter, which I don't care. I love, actually. But it's something that people can be teased for. People can, she's very easily intimidated, and her mother's family has been keeping her away from her father, who is a gambling den owner, and he is dying. And though he's going to be leaving her all of his money, her family has been trying to control her and force her to marry her cousin so that they can have her dowry, and they've been manipulating her, and her father's been too sick and weak to do anything about it. And so we've been seeing Evie be manipulated for the past couple books. Changing the lighting up a little bit. And Evie goes to see St. Vincent after she discovers what he tried to do to her friend and said, I will marry you. You can have control of my money, but I want to be able to sit by my father until he dies. So it's a heavy setup to a book. And, you know, St. Vincent, of course, says that he's not going to care. He's not going to do anything. And then he gets control of her family, of the gambling den, which we have seen, like I've seen in previous books, him running this place. And we also get to meet Cam, who I'm going to talk about in another video soon. Cam is this half Romani, half Irishman who has been like helping run the place while her father's been dying. And so we get to meet all these people that I've known for so long. But anyway, specifically about St. Vincent, we get to see how he goes from literally the devil. Like there's a reason he's called the devil, and how he broke our trust and how he just ruined us in the last book. We trusted him and he destroyed it. He threatened to rape Lillian. And then we get to see Evie kind of break down his defenses and realize that that was all bluster. It was still a horrible thing, and it takes us a long time to forgive him, but he has goodness in him. So that's the first one. The next one I want to talk about is from a future series, which is Cold-Hearted Rake starts the Ravenel series. And, you know, it's got Rake in the title, so we know it's going to be a good one. And this one is about a man who his cousin dies after only being married for like a week, or 2 weeks or something, to his wife. And he doesn't want this job. Like, he doesn't want to be the Earl here. He doesn't want the responsibility of his cousins. He has 3 unmarried cousins and this widow of his cousin, and he just wants to sell the place and move along. Well, the place is in ruins, and so he needs to fix it up first if he wants to sell it, and he just wants to go back to his life being wasteful. Like, he just wants to go back to that. He doesn't want to deal with the responsibility or all the tenants and people who would rely on him if he would take over this position. I really like this because we get introduced to him and his brother as well, who is also a reformed rake, and I actually feel like he goes through a really crazy transformation as well. But he was just someone who I loved this story because it introduced us to an entire family. That's something that Lisa is very good at. Each series of hers I've read so far, in that first book, they set up all these people so beautifully. And it makes me so, it gets you so anticipating the other books in the series. And I love that about her. So next, I want to talk to you about Edward Grayling from The Earl Takes All. So this book, number one, is very emotional. So the setup of this book is that Edward and his brother, Albert, went on a trip to Africa. And Albert, who is married to, he is married to the Countess of Grayling, and she is expecting their first child. And Albert gets mauled by a lion, or a gorilla. He gets mauled by a gorilla and dies. And his last, you know, few moments, which are very excruciating and painful, he asks Edward to pretend to be him so that his wife won't miscarry the child, because she's miscarried before, and he's worried that the news of his death would cause that to happen again. Edward has lived a pretty rakeful life. Obviously, that's the point of this trope. But there are reasons why he's been living that life. But he's been living a completely audacious life. We've seen him in the previous book too, just living it up. And he has a really contentious relationship with his sister-in-law. But the reasoning is he has been in love with her since before his brother married her. And they've only ever kissed once, when Edward was mistaken for Albert and she kissed him. And she's always held it against him that he didn't tell her sooner, even though she kind of like jumped on him and kissed him. And so Edward needs to pretend to be Albert until the baby is born, hopefully a boy. And this book is filled with so much heartache, because you find so much of who Edward has pretended to be is to make his brother look better than him, to make his brother be the star. He has made mistakes and done things on purpose, as well as just because he's given up trying to have what he wants to have. And this book was so emotional and beautiful. And yeah, you know what the conflict is right away, because obviously his sister-in-law is going to find out what he's doing, and she's extremely attracted to her husband, and he's safe because she's pregnant and because she's high risk. He doesn't need to be performing any bedroom duties, but number one, he wants to, but he would never betray her that way. And number two, what's she gonna do when she finds out? And he's slowly been falling in love with her even more. And this one is very interesting how it gets worked out, and I highly suggest it. I actually bought this entire series by Lorraine because I read the blurb on the back of this book, because I'm like, wow. I loved the idea of twins. I loved the idea of him being self-sacrificial, but everyone thinking that it's, he's getting the better end of this deal. But the thing is, with his brother dead, like, he is the Earl anyway. Unless that child is a boy, he is the Earl either way, but he would have to live the rest of his life as his brother, listening to people say bad things about him, listening to them say, oh, well, we're so glad that it wasn't you. Oh, so many feelings. So this book is amazing, and Edward will break your heart. It's so good. It's so good. Love it. And I'm going to read all the Lorraine Heath. All right, next I got to talk about another wonderful Rake, and that is, this one is The Duke of Hartford. This is the fourth book in the Spindle Cove series, which I accidentally read first in the series. I still haven't read a couple of the ones in this one. But this is about Pauline, who wants to open a bookshop where ladies are allowed to shop. And we have the Duke of Hartford, who his mother, this book starts with his mother having drugged him and kidnapped him and brought him to Spindle Cove, and tells him to pick a woman, any woman, and I will turn her into a duchess, and you'll have a wife. Pick anyone in this room. And to mess with his mother, he picks the barmaid and says, that's going to be my duchess. And so unbeknownst to his mother then, him and the duchess she's not the duchess, him and this duchess, hopeful, make a deal that if she will fail horribly at everything his mother tries to teach her, he will help her open her bookshop and leave her alone at the end of this time. But of course, she ends up being very good at being a duchess, and they end up having a lot of chemistry. So this is cute because it takes a guy who he just wants to continue his carousing life, and his mother literally steps in quite forcibly, and it ends up being super cute. So this is a reformed Rake. We have the lovely Griffin, and I really liked this story. I've loved every Tessa Dare I've read. There's been nothing less than like a 4.5 stars, and this is a beautiful, beautiful one. Next, gotta mention my girl Julia Quinn, who has some wonderful rakes in her repertoire. So this one is called When He Was Wicked, and this is number 6 in the Bridgerton series. This one in particular you can read out of order. I know people say you can always read out of order, but when you're reading a series about siblings, I just think it's smart to read it in order of how she wrote it. But this one in particular doesn't take place with all of the other Bridgertons, because Francesca actually got married pretty early on in the series. And so you're confused about what her story is going to be, because she got married before a lot of the other Bridgertons did, and hers is book 6. Well, something horrible that happens to her is that her husband dies of malaria quite young. So she's only married for like a couple years, and then he dies. And so his older cousin, or younger cousin, Michael, becomes is it an Earl or a Duke? Not sure. Never sure with these. Probably an Earl or something, comes into the title. And this is another case of he has loved her all this time, and he doesn't want to be that guy who swoops in and takes the widow away. And the difference in this case being, I didn't say this about the Earl takes all, but one of the laws in England for a very long time is that you couldn't marry your brother's widow. You couldn't marry your sister-in-law after your brother died. But this one is their cousin, so they absolutely could. But Francesca, it's been 5 years that Michael took over being the Earl, and he has stayed away. He hasn't been home. He's let Francesca just stay on the property, and he has went away. He has traveled. He has purposely avoided her. He has lived a life of debauchery, and now he's tired, and he comes home. And Francesca, she wants to have a baby. She wants to have a family. So she's still young-ish, like she's only in her later 20s. Youngish for the time. You know what I mean. Like, I'm 27. I don't think that's old. But she wants to get married and have a baby. And so she wants him to come home and help her get everything figured out. And so he comes back and he's faced with, you know, dealing with all of these feelings and dealing with finding her more attractive than he ever has, and dealing with the guilt that he's afraid that he wished that he wished his cousin dead so that he could have her. He's dealing with that guilt and pain, and they're both still grieving because there was nothing wrong with her husband. He was a wonderful, wonderful man. This isn't a case of he was really a cruel bastard or anything. Like, he was wonderful. And yeah, it was hard. It was hard, but this is really great. He is super sexy. It is called When He Was Wicked, and I love it. I love it. And then finally, I have to talk about one of my new favorite historical romances that I've talked about a few times, and that is Rough Surrender by Carrie Silverwood. So this is a fun one. This is actually set in the early 1900s. It's set in like 1905, and it's set in Egypt. And it's set during a time when flying was just becoming a thing. And so we have this wonderful woman who wants to fly, and she has a plane that she's brought to this exhibition. And then we have this gentleman who meets her and is instantly attracted to her, but he has a few little kinks going on. He is into BDSM in 1905, and it's a difficult time to be into the scene because he usually has to resort to prostitutes who he pays to let them do things to them, and he's never met a woman of his class who would be interested. Also, he's never really asked because he's afraid of what they would say and what would happen if he was honest about what he desires. And so he meets this woman, and she's totally into it, and it's super hot, and I love that it's a historical romance, and I love how BDSM was navigated in this story. There's also a mystery going on. There's someone who's killing prostitutes in pretty violent ways, and so we're dealing with a mystery about that. It's one of the few times where I've read historical romance where the mystery throughout it wasn't just like tacked on at the end. Like, it was really set up. It's set up in the beginning and throughout. So that's really nice as well. There was some suspense in here. And yeah, it was really, really great. And I loved seeing him realize that he's not dirty or wrong because he wants this, and that when he's found, and also I just loved his headspace because he didn't have a typical like Dom headspace. I mean, he kind of does, but it was just really cute how excited, not just excited, but just how excited he is to find someone who shares his feelings, and then finding a way to explain it because she feels the feelings and she likes what they get into, but also she doesn't know how to handle it because it's just so much. So anyway, it was really fun, and he definitely is what I would consider a reformed Rake in this situation. I also think it's a good intro to BDSM if you are interested in checking that out, but don't want to, you know, dive in the deep end of anything. I feel like it's good because it still has the fun and like tension of a historical romance mixed with a little bit spicy. So definitely suggest that. So there you go. There are 6 recommendations for some reformed rakes. They're always nice and sexy and just heartwarming at the end of the day. So thank you so much for watching. I put up new videos every, not a specific day, but 3 to 4 times a week. So please check that out, and I'll see you